Good morning, everybody. Is the sound okay? Can you hear me fine? You type a message in the chat window. Just give a moment before I get started to make sure I get a thumbs up from someone. All good, perfect. All right, so welcome to this morning's webinar, MSI Prevention, Computers and Mobile Computing Devices. I'm Cheryl Osborne, and I work in prevention services, and I'm the musculoskeletal injury prevention advisor. The way we work in recent years is very different due to advancements in computer technology. And nowadays it's normal for a worker to use multiple kinds of computing devices, such as laptops, smartphones, and tablets. The days of sitting in an office are also becoming a thing of the past for some of us. Certainly as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of people working remotely has significantly increased. By continuing to leverage technology, it is possible that remote work will become even more prevalent in the future. Many organizations have introduced the option for workers to permanently work from home. Others have made this a requirement, and others more are introducing hybrid models on a go-forward basis. What does seem to be clear is that remote work and the use of technology will continue on into the future. No matter where we work or the kinds of technology we use, risks for MSI still exist, and the practice of ergonomics is ever so important. Today's webinar is part of the Health and Safety Learning Series program designed and delivered by staff at Workplace NL to increase the education and awareness of occupational health and safety and return to work in the workplace. The workshops and webinars address the injury priorities and fulfill the strategic mandate of Workplace NL. And today's webinar is part of the learning series. At Workplace NL, we serve approximately 215,000 workers and 18,000 employers. We administer an employer-funded no-fault workers' compensation system that promotes safe and healthy workplaces, provides return-to-work programs, and offers compensation to injured workers and their dependents. A few housekeeping items. There is a PDF copy of today's presentation in the handouts section of the webinar, of the program here. And also in the handout section, you'll see 4 more resources, which I'll refer to later on in the webinar. I encourage you to ask questions. If you would like to ask a question, just type it into the chat window and I will respond to them at the end or in a follow-up email if we run out of time. Tina will be sending out an evaluation form as well, and I encourage you to complete that as it helps us develop better and more meaningful webinars. And you can also include any topics of interest that you'd like to see us present on in the future. And every 30 minutes, we're going to take a micro break. So I'll ask you to stand and stretch and get your body moving to give your body the opportunity for blood to return back to the tissues that have essentially lost blood flow or had reduced blood flow from sitting prolonged periods. This is actually an MSI prevention control, and you're going to hear me speak to that throughout today's presentation. Mobile device developments such as laptops, notebooks, tablets, and smartphones have left many businesses uncertain about the best way to manage the ergonomic health risks associated with mobile working. So this webinar will describe the legislative requirements as it applies to mobile working and identify responsibilities and obligations of workplace parties. It will provide employers and employees with information and resources which they can use to identify possible MSI risks involved with desktop computing and mobile working. For example, at home, on planes, in hotels, cafes, waiting areas, etc. Visiting offices, other people's offices. And it's also going to provide resources and guidance on what employers should be doing to manage and reduce the risks. This webinar will also cover best practices for using these types of devices, so usage recommendations. Whether you're used to working remotely or this is an uncharted territory, Working from home or in the field presents some challenges, and this webinar is going to help you keep ergonomics in check to maintain your physical and mental health. This week is Musculoskeletal Injury Prevention Week, so it's nearing the end now. It ends tomorrow. Hopefully workplaces have had an opportunity to be able to educate workplace parties, staff, community, workers, occupational health and safety committee members, and that sort of thing about MSIs. And hopefully you've been able to have some good conversation in the workplace about ways that you could prevent them. That's what Musculoskeletal Injury Prevention Week, or Move Well, Work Well Week, is all about. Move Well, Work Well reminds us that when we move often, rather than being sedentary or staying in one position too long, and when we move well using good body mechanics, it results in us being well and working well. We're productive, comfortable, healthy, and our risk for MSI is reduced. Essentially, when we move well, we work well. Just if you've joined us already this week for webinars, you've heard this a number of times, so I apologize for the repeat, but for anyone new on today's webinar, we have an employer feedback survey on our website, www.workplacenl.ca. And when you go to our website, we have a musculoskeletal injury prevention page, and there's a sub-tab under that called Move Well, Work Well. On that page is where you'll find the survey, and you can enter your name for a prize draw. All we want to really know is how you marked the week and how we might help you to improve a campaign or to put off a campaign next year and in future years. So your feedback is definitely important to us, and I encourage you after this webinar is over to jump in and complete that survey before you move along to other work. So these are some of the common modern devices used nowadays. We are seeing laptops, notebooks, netbooks, which are inexpensive notebooks with basic features, ultrabooks, tablets, Chromebooks, smartphones. And the design of smartphones have certainly changed over the years. They've gotten larger, and now we're seeing the foldable smartphones on the market, such as these. A few different designs. You get the Galaxy Z Flip 5G, which features a flip phone style design, the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2, and the LG Wing. With that one on the right there, it's the second screen is hidden behind the main display, and when you need the extra screen space, you just swivel that secondary panel into place. Mobile work is when a worker uses mobile devices for work purposes in whatever type of location that occurs. Some tasks performed during mobile work would be phone calls, virtual meetings are very common nowadays, emails, writing them, sending them, receiving and reading them, texting, internet surfing, doing research and those sort of things on the internet, document writing, spreadsheet work, working on presentations. And in addition to what we do for work purposes, we all nowadays, or the majority of us, use mobile and smart devices for personal reasons too. Taking photos and videos, checking the time and the weather, checking our emails, personal emails, keeping up with messages from school. That's certainly a common one for me. Searching the web, playing games, online banking, visiting social networks, sites, Facebook, and that sort of stuff. Looking up directions when we're traveling. Some of us spend a significant number of hours, our waking hours, using mobile devices when you think about how much you use them both for work and for personal reasons. The COVID-19 crisis created a sudden need for businesses and their employees to take up or increase working from home. In January 2021, this year, 32% of Canadian employees worked most of their hours from home, compared to just 4% in 2016, 5 years before. This past June 2021, HR Reporter wrote that in a report from the Business Development Bank of Canada, BDC, it was stated that nearly 3/4, 74% of employers plan to keep offering employees the ability to work remotely, even after it's safe to return to the office. According to BDC, more than half, 54% of employees say that access to remote work will be a determining factor when applying for or accepting a job in the future. So it's become quite clear that the Canadian workforce is experiencing a large and permanent shift in the way we work. In fact, according to Statista, in 2021, 88.5% of Canadian population accessed the internet via mobile device. And this figure is projected to grow to 97.1% in 2026. In 2021, so this year, the number of mobile internet users in Canada amounted to over 33.7 million. Mobile internet users means using mobile phones for more than just phone calls. So with so many people interacting with these devices, it is so important to educate about the potential health risks associated with their use and how to use them in a healthy manner. What is a musculoskeletal injury? Musculoskeletal injury and soft tissue injury are used interchangeably, these two terms. In short, we call them MSIs, or we call musculoskeletal injuries MSIs, because it's certainly a lot easier to say. Their injuries or disorders of the muscles, tendons, ligaments, joints, nerves, and related soft tissues that are all part of our musculoskeletal system or our movement system. They include sprains, strains, tears, and inflammation that may be caused or aggravated by work. Some other common names are shown on the screen here. So repetitive strain injuries, overexertion injuries, overuse injuries, cumulative trauma disorders. They're all referring to the same kinds of injuries. Injuries to the soft tissues that make up that movement system, that make our skeleton move. Physical stress and strain sometimes produces microscopic wear and fatigue to our tissues, our soft tissues. And normally this fatigue is fully repaired by rest, circulation, and nutrition through the blood supply. But too much fatigue coupled with too little repair can lead to MSI. Minor pain and discomfort can lead to debilitating injuries. MSIs from mobile working tend to develop over time as a result of cumulative damage to body's tissues. And not just mobile working, but working with any kind of computing device. So even with a desktop computer in your workplace, in the office. It can be a span of many days and weeks, and sometimes months and even years before the symptoms actually develop. Carpal tunnel syndrome and tendonitis are examples of MSIs that don't just happen in a day. So when chronic soft tissue fatigue outpaces our body's ability to repair and recover, then the fatigue can run into inflammation and then muscle tightness and discomfort and then pain and then musculoskeletal structural imbalances. And finally, it could even lead to lost function of a body part. And eye strain. Eye strain is another common symptom of incorrect use or prolonged use of display screen equipment. Like an alarm system, these signs and symptoms are our body's way of telling us that something's wrong. There's something irritating your body. And ignoring the symptoms without dealing with what's causing your issues in the first place will only cause your issues to worsen. In the early stages, computer-related disorders often present as non-specific symptoms without physical or laboratory findings, and many times the signs and symptoms may be present in one location, but the actual cause may be in others. So they can be difficult to diagnose, which is part of the reason why these types of claims become quite lengthy. Common MSIs related to computer work would be tension neck syndrome, rotator cuff tendonitis, thoracic outlet syndrome, epicondylitis, so tennis elbow and golfer's elbow, carpal tunnel syndrome, Guillain tunnel syndrome, de Quervain syndrome, trigger finger, Raynaud's syndrome, ganglion cysts. There's several MSIs related to the use of computers and mobile computing devices. You might have heard of text thumb. This is a musculoskeletal disorder, but it's not clearly defined. It's sometimes clinically diagnosed as de Quervain syndrome, where the sheaths around the tendons controlling your thumb movements become thickened and irritated by repetitive thumb use. Alternately, it can be classified as trigger thumb or thumb arthritis, depending on the symptoms and the response to clinical tests. Text claw and smartphone pinky are two other commonly used terms describing pain and restricted function in the hands linked to the use of mobile devices. Some important indicators of a significant problem are dull aches in joints, recurrent pain, the same type of pain in the same area during work and outside of work, which make normal work or home activities difficult, possibly leading to avoiding certain tasks. Sleep disturbance, being kept awake by discomfort or numbness, loss of strength in the affected limb, stiff joints, swelling, burning sensations, and pins and needles. These all indicate a more significant problem than typical muscle fatigue. Pain lasting for more than 24 hours after the associated activity has finished is another significant indicator of a problem. If you have any of these symptoms or any others that you're concerned about, you're advised to follow up with your company procedure, use your company procedures, and typically that means the first step is to speak with your supervisor and complete a report, an incident report. Legislative requirements. Legal duties of employers and employees. Employers have a legal duty under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to manage and reduce the risks which employees are exposed to when they carry out their work. And employees have a duty to comply with the instructions and systems that their employers have put in place to manage the risks. So in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have 7 sections in the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations for MSI prevention, sections 50 to 54, and then which those sections speak more to the programming requirements of employers to recognize, evaluate, and control MSI risks, and to continuously follow up, monitor the controls for effectiveness and educate and train workers, consulting with workers. And then there's 2 more sections, 55 and 56. And 55 in particular applies to workers who use computers and computing devices. That's seating work. So basically, I guess to summarize, employers are required to have a process to recognize, evaluate, and control MSI risks. And this includes the risks involved with mobile working. If an employer provides equipment to employees for working, regardless of the location, they have legal duties to educate their employees on any associated health risks, to assess those risks, and to control the risks, which might include providing additional equipment to control the risks. For example, an external keyboard and mouse to use with a laptop. Employers must provide workers a suitable workstation that accommodates neutral posture and give direction on setting up that station properly. They must ensure staff understand the need for breaks and ensure that work demands allow them to be able to take those breaks. They must provide information about the MSI risks and how to mitigate them, and monitor how employees work with their devices, their computers and other devices when they're working mobile. Workers should be monitored on how they're using those devices, how they're interacting with them. Ensure that any equipment that's provided to make their work safer is actually being used and used properly, such as laptop stands and portable keyboards and an external mouse. So of course, I'm sure you're saying, how can I monitor that when they're doing it in the home, and due to COVID, we can't enter homes and that sort of stuff. We can be creative. We can have employees send photos of their setup. We can send them emails and remind them of their proper setup and ask them to send us pictures. Where a substantial proportion of work can be done while seated. So this is where section 55 comes into place. comes into play, where a substantial proportion of work can be done while seated, and employers shall provide and maintain for a worker a seat suitably designed, constructed, dimensioned, and supported for the worker to do the work, including where necessary, a footrest that can readily and comfortably support the feet. And this applies to mobile work too. So who would pay for the equipment? Well, if your employer provides you with mobile devices and expects as a condition of your work and as a significant part of your work that you use them away from the office, then the employer should provide you with risk controlling equipment, such as laptop stands, external keyboards, and a mouse, for example. If you're a worker and you're not provided the equipment needed to work in neutral postures, then you need to notify your supervisor and take more frequent micro breaks for the time being. It gets a little different when the employer is giving the worker the option to work from home versus making it a requirement to work from home. If the employer ultimately is responsible for providing suitable equipment for the worker to do the work, and if they can provide that in the office environment and it's safe to be in the office environment, well then there we are. The worker has a choice to go into the office. If the worker opts to remain at home, well then often you'll see that the employer requires the worker to provide the equipment to work with an ideal setup, an ergonomically sound setup. But it is the employer's responsibility to ensure that the workers do have that proper ergonomic setup. Because ultimately, if they're injured at home, but it's in the course of work, then if injuries develop, then it's a workplace claim. Implementing the CSA standard Z412-17, which is Office Ergonomics, an application standard for workplace ergonomics. This is a good place to begin with helping to comply with the regulations and determine how to set up an ergonomically sound mobile workspace. It provides requirements for applying ergonomics in office work systems, such as using computers and mobile devices, and it speaks to some specific requirements for non-traditional workspaces, like in vehicles and home offices. Under the legislation, OHS legislation, every workplace party, including individual workers, have a role to play in preventing MSIs, as mentioned. Employers must provide the tools, equipment, and any other controls for workers to do their jobs without an increased risk of MSI, and workers must use the equipment, tools, or other controls that have been provided, and they must follow established safe work practices and procedures. So as the regulations imply for employers, they have to perform risk assessments, identify job tasks that may expose workers to the risk of MSI, evaluate the risk, implement controls, and follow up, educate and train the workers in the safe work practices and procedures. So they need to ensure that workers have a general awareness of hazards and risks that can be addressed through their ergonomics process. They need to ensure workers know the signs and symptoms of MSI and the potential health effects from the risk factors that they're exposed to in mobile or computer working, and train workers in the specific control measures. Essentially, they have to provide the resources necessary for a healthy and safe work activity or workplace. Supervisors. It's the responsibility of a supervisor to encourage employees to report identified MSI risk factors and all signs and symptoms immediately upon detection, to make every effort to work with employees to control risk factors, including correcting problems with their workstations, to determine the effectiveness of the measures that have been adopted by monitoring such changes immediately after they're implemented and at regular intervals, so checking in with the employee. Reporting any MSI signs and symptoms and concerns that the supervisor can't address themselves, reporting it to human resources in a timely manner. Attending MSI prevention education and training sessions involving MSI risk factor, risk recognition, evaluation, and control, or hazard rec. They must enforce safe work practices and procedures, ensure that MSI prevention training opportunities are made available to their employees, and encourage and promote good ergonomics practices. So just, continuous reminders to workers about their setups, making sure that it's, kept in the forefront. It's kept in the workers' minds to be aware and cognizant of their postures when they're working and that sort of thing. Employees. It's the responsibility of an employee to report any identified MSI concerns to their supervisor as soon as detected, such as feeling the need to work through lunch breaks to meet work demands because the demands are so high, to make appropriate changes to their workstation and job tasks that are within their control, to report MSI signs and symptoms to their supervisor as soon as possible, soon as detected or experienced, to work in cooperation with the employer and supervisor and Occupational Health and Safety Committee or designate rep, and any other persons involved during a risk assessment. Employees must use ergonomic adjustments as directed in order to determine their effectiveness and to report any discomfort to the supervisor. They must participate in ergonomics-related education and training and maintain an awareness of MSIs, as well as comply with safe work practices and procedures. And finally, the committee. The responsibilities of the OHS committee are to review MSI statistics regularly to help identify trends, to attend MSI prevention education and training sessions as well, involving MSI risk identification, evaluation, and control, and to recommend controls to minimize risk to workers. All this applies to working with computers and mobile devices, just like any other type of equipment or tool the worker uses. Risk factors. So knowledge of the relationship between computer usage and MSIs are essential for preventing MSIs and the severity of them. Workers need to understand the risk factors for MSI related to display screen equipment so that they can understand how to mitigate the risks. The 4 MSI risk factors on the slide in bold are the most common ones causing MSIs in our province, but the bottom 2 also cause or contribute to MSIs among workers who use computing devices. So starting with the first, we have awkward postures, which are postures that require a body part to move away from its natural or neutral position. Looking at the picture here on the slide, this is what's called neutral posture. So that's the reference point. When we take a body segment away from that position, then it means that the body part is in an awkward position or an awkward posture. And the farther the body segment is away from the neutral position, the higher the risk of an MSI. Repetitive motions occur when we use the same muscles repeatedly to do our work. It could be performing computer work for long periods of time or switching work up but using the same muscles. So an example would be working on a smartphone immediately following an extended period of computer work. In this case, the neck and arm muscles are working to use the computer keyboard and mouse, and the same muscles are working to type on the smartphone. Without sufficient breaks, muscles fatigue and injuries can develop over time. This applies to small muscles too, such as those in the fingers and hands. Combine repetition with awkward postures of the working muscles and you have increased risk. So your arms being extended in front of you to reach your keyboard because your keyboard is not close enough to you. Forceful exertions. This is usually thought of as a strenuous physical exertion, so we tend to associate it with manual handling of loads, heavy loads, pushing and pulling loads, carrying loads. But computer work seldom requires this type of strenuous exertion, but there are tasks that require concentrated force on smaller localized muscles, and this can be an issue. So as an example, your finger and forearm muscles may become sore if you use a pointing device at a setting that is so sensitive that it's hard to control. Hand and arm muscles must work continually to keep the device steady. Your shoulder and neck muscles are continually being used to lift the arm away from the body if the mouse is placed too far away. The muscles of the back can become strained if you must tilt your head back to view a monitor that's too high. Localized pain, stiffness, and tenderness can signal the muscle or tendon has been exerted beyond its capacity. Transporting laptops and supporting equipment is another consideration with respect to force. The weight of the laptop and carrying case may increase the risk of shoulder and back strain if carried frequently for long durations, if carried improperly, or if it's just too heavy. Sustained posture refers to holding the body or a single body part, such as the arm, in the same position for an extended period. So even sitting with a good, healthy posture is problematic if we don't change our posture often enough. And our neck, shoulders, and arms are common areas where the muscles are continuously held in the same position to complete our work, such as typing and mousing. And without sufficient movement of these body parts and without sufficient rest for the blood to return to the muscles, then stress accumulates and reduces the muscle's tolerance, resulting in progressive tissue damage. The general recommendation is that sitting should not be any longer than 20 to 30 minutes at a time, and standing should be less than 45 minutes continuous. And because we've become a technologically advanced sitting-oriented society, the risk factor of sustained posture is of great concern today. Too much sitting, which is a sedentary behavior, increases our risk of developing numerous chronic illnesses and conditions, which medical experts collectively refer to as sitting disease. Local contact stress is the physical contact made between body tissues and hard objects and surfaces. Resting your wrists on your desk when you're typing or resting your forearms against the edge of your desk are examples. This compresses nerves, blood vessels, and other tissues beneath the skin. Blood circulation is then decreased and nerve and muscle function is disrupted. And all of this can cause damage over time. And finally, inadequate or insufficient lighting can lead to workers using awkward postures or sustained postures to see their work. It could be too much light, like glare, which is a common issue in workplaces, poorly distributed light, improper contrast between the lighting in a room and a screen, or flickering light. So glare on screens from the sunlight or overhead lights can cause eye strain and affect the person's ability to see. Glare from overhead lighting is more of an issue for those using mobile devices who tend to look down at the device rather than keeping the device more vertical at closer to eye level. Flickering fluorescent lights can cause headaches and eye strain. Blue light exposure from smartphone screens in the evening and night can interfere with the circadian rhythm, which has been linked to sleep disturbances and other health disorders. The settings of most backlit electronic devices have the option to turn down blue light spectrum later in the day and evening. Good lighting means providing enough illumination so that people can see printed, handwritten, or displayed electronic documents clearly, but are not blinded by excessively high light levels, a cause of glare. So that's the risk factors for MSIs specific to the use of computers and mobile computing devices. Before we actually look at each of the individual devices and the specific issues with them, we're going to take a micro break. So 30 minutes are up. I ask you to stand up from your chairs and move around, shake out your limbs, get the blood circulating again back into your butt and your legs. If you want to go get a glass of water or top up your coffee, whatever it is you wish to do, feel free, and I'll be back with you in 2 minutes. Okay, so now we're going to turn our attention to each of the more common computer devices that's used in occupations or in the workplace, and look at some of the MSI risk factors. So starting off with desktop computers and awkward postures, the neck is a common place where we see awkward postures from desktop computers. For example, the worker has to look down at the monitor because it's too low, it's positioned too low, or they're looking down to see the keyboard because they need to actually see the keys that they're using to type because they don't have good typing skills. Or the neck is rotated to the side because the screen is not directly in front of them. The shoulders are raised if the keyboard and mouse are too high. Having the back slouched forward rather than upright with the back against the backrest and a good supported spine, upright, engaged core. Slouching while sitting with the back slumped against the backrest of the chair compresses the spine, and it can lead to low back pain. It puts the head in an unbalanced position as well, that gooseneck type posture that you see in the picture on top here. And this contributes to neck and shoulder MSIs. A slouchy sitting position encourages the worker to rest the wrists on the edge of the desk as well, with the hands pointing upward, the wrists bent back. This is one of the most important must not do's because it can cause carpal tunnel syndrome. In the top image there, this is the typical seated posture when working at a desktop or a laptop. The rib cage collapses, the shoulders roll forward, the head extends away from the body. Your top heavy weight, rather than being absorbed evenly by your spine in neutral posture, it's now concentrated on your neck. The C-shaped spine develops as opposed to your natural S-shaped spine. You've got that gooseneck posture again. The abdominal muscles are giving little support to the spine. Your bum muscles, your gluteus muscles, shut off. Essentially, they're not even being used, so that can cause muscle wasting. The wrists are bent due to the planting of the hands for support. The shoulders, neck, and chest muscles tighten and stiffen. The back ligaments can stretch in this posture, and eventually this could compromise your ability to stabilize your spine, therefore increasing risk of back injuries down the road. This posture also increases tension on the nerves running from the neck to your arms, and it can cause numbing and tingling. Neck pain is a common byproduct of a rounded spine due to shear forces on a few segments of the cervical spine. Muscles in the shoulders also take a lot of strain, your upper trapezius muscles. We're more likely to slouch forward when our work is too far away from us, or when we're sitting for too long a period of time and our body is just getting tired. Arms extended in front of you because the keyboard is too far away is another example of an awkward posture. The elbows should be at or near your body sides, and having your wrists bent backward because the keyboard is too low, or having them bent down because the keyboard is too high. These both put you at risk of carpal tunnel syndrome. And sustained postures, sitting, the obvious, which is the main issue today, it seems, in society, and static neck and shoulder position, which is causing that static muscle contraction in the neck and shoulder area from extended typing or mousing without a break. And then we've got repetitive movements, of course, with your fingers to type and mouse, and possibly repetitive arm movements to reach forward for that keyboard or mouse too, if they're too far away. And repetitive neck bending if you have to look down at your screen or at your keyboard. For your desktops continued, we have contact stress as well. So compression behind the knees from the front edge of the seat because the seat pan is too deep. Compression in the wrists from resting the wrist onto the desk or against the front edge of the desk. Inadequate lighting. Glare from sunlight shining on the screen because the monitor is not positioned perpendicular to windows, or there isn't a suitable barrier from the sunlight. Glare because your monitor is positioned directly under overhead lights rather than between rows of lighting. Forceful exertions as well of the neck and shoulders if you're continuously lifting the arms away from the body because the mouse is placed too far away, for example. And of the back muscles if you must tilt your head back to view a monitor that's too high. Now let's turn to laptops and notebooks. Laptops are increasingly being used as people's main work computers. However, the basic design of a laptop is not ergonomic from a musculoskeletal point of view, and so laptops are not ergonomically appropriate for long-term use. Laptops are more problematic than desktops because the screen and keyboard are connected, so this creates an ongoing trade-off between poor neck and head posture and poor hand-wrist posture. Having the keyboard at a usable height means that the screen will be too low, causing poor neck posture, and on the other hand, if the screen is raised to a suitable height, then the attached keyboard essentially becomes unusable. The display size on screens of laptops may result in difficulty reading, leading to increased bending of the neck and upper back. It creates the turtle posture, having that hunched back with the protruding head and neck from cramming the body into the space of the joined input devices and small monitor. Smaller keys and closer spacing between the keys may result in cramped and awkward postures for hands, wrists, arms, and shoulders. And it can also cause shoulder internal rotation. So the shoulders are starting to come round forward as opposed to being set back where they should be. And the wrists, having a built-in trackball or glide point on that laptop and not having an external mouse, that places the wrist in an awkward angle. Bent wrists from typing on the compact size keyboard is another awkward posture, and wrist extension and ulnar deviation, which means your wrists are bending sideways towards the side of your pinky from using just the built-in keyboard and mouse. And then there's awkward hand and finger movements from using the touchpad too. So by their nature, laptops and notebooks are not designed for long, continuous work at a stationary office, and they're designed more to be used as an auxiliary device while traveling or when out of the office. But it has become an increasingly frequent phenomenon to see laptops and notebooks used as the main and very often the only computer in the office. And it's unfortunate that laptops are also often used in settings where furniture is not adjustable, including in offices. We also have the issue, of course, with laptops and notebooks of sustained postures, no different than with the desktops. But with laptops, you probably could be more likely to experience more sustained postures or more sitting time, because in addition to being used in the office, workers have the ability to take them home now and continue on and do some work. Maybe they have had a deadline that they're trying to meet, and so they're continuing to work even on days off. Workers are spending significant amount of times on these devices, right? And I guess the unfortunate thing is that if we're taking them in the home environment, but the home environment hasn't been set up to use them properly, now we're using them likely without that external keyboard or mouse or monitor. We could be using them on our lap as opposed to on a desk or table. We don't have that docking station. We might not be using a footrest to support the feet and also therefore the back. Chairs in the home might not have an armrest, or the armrests are probably not adjustable or don't adjust to the needs of the person using it. And they could be sitting cross-legged. That's another common thing I see is people sitting cross-legged using their laptops, or laying prone, face down with the neck extended back and compression on the elbows. So once you're in these specific configuration, or once you're in your specific posture of choice, there's usually then very little variation in that posture for quite some time. So you have sustained awkward postures. We have repetitive movements again with laptops and notebooks, contact stress. So when the hands, from resting the hands on the edge of the laptop, the forearms from resting the arms against the edge of a table or desk, and also in the legs from crossing the legs, if that's one of your habits. Potential for inadequate lighting as well, using laptops and notebooks, because we use these in certainly a much larger range of environments, things like places like airports, cafes, hotel rooms, bedrooms and basements, dining room tables over a chandelier, in a room with many windows with sunlight beaming in maybe. And then we've got forceful exertions again of the neck and shoulders if we're continuously lifting the arm away from the body because the keyboard and the built-in mouse is placed too far away in order to keep the screen at a comfortable distance. So that's what I often tend to see done as well, is the laptop will be placed on a table, but it's placed in on a table so that the arms are resting on the table to keep that screen farther away from the eyes. And tablets. More recently, tablets have increased mobile working flexibility. Their use as a primary work equipment is on the rise. However, tablets, like laptops, introduce ergonomic risks. Their use can lead to particularly poor neck and back posture and repetitive thumb actions. Extended use may also lead to digital eye strain. Some of the awkward postures would certainly be of the head or your neck, I guess, neck flexion. You're tilting your head forward, or that would be the most typical posture of the neck. Shoulder internal rotation, so instead of your shoulders being set back, like I mentioned before, instead now they're rotating inward. Slouching with the back, wrist extension, so the wrists are bent back, and as well wrist ulnar deviation, again having your wrists bent toward that pinky side. And also awkward postures with your fingers and thumbs to use the device. There's the potential for sustained postures as well, and contact stress, inadequate lighting, and forceful exertions. And smartphones. Smartphones are now standard work equipment for many people. Their use can lead to particularly poor neck and back postures as well, and repetitive thumb actions too, and digital eye strain as well. So there's a lot of overlap and similar risk factors with all these computing devices. With awkward postures, the bending of the neck is a typical posture taken when we're looking at the small phone screen. We have a natural tendency to hold mobile devices around chest height or even lower, possibly because of the effort involved in holding them up, and also possibly because we want to be able to maintain some screen privacy. But as the head moves forward in that turtle posture, of course, there's strain on the neck, and that substantially increases the longer we hold that posture. Some users tilt their head down so much that their chin is practically on their chest. In the long term, poor neck posture can result in chronic pain and a more permanent loss of posture. In studies, it was found that when using a smartphone in sitting posture, users often seek out support for the arm holding the device. These studies also report that when using a forearm support or elbow support, less neck and head bending or flexion is observed. So that's a good thing. But if we're leaning into one arm rest, we may be twisting or side bending our neck to see the screen. So we need to be mindful of that too. If the user's legs are not well supported, it will definitely affect the posture of the neck and consequently increase neck strain as well as back strain if the legs are not supported. Because we tend to come forward, our back tends to come forward then to see the devices in front of us if we're not able to support our feet and legs. With the extremely high screen resolution of new smartphones and tablets, although there's some benefits, it could lead to people reading and focusing for long periods on extremely small text, resulting in poor neck posture and eye strain. When on a call, we might cradle the phone between our ear and shoulder, so the neck is bent sideways and the shoulder is being elevated. Two more awkward postures. The shoulders, again, rounding forward when we're looking at the phone. Awkward wrist posture to view the screen. Wrists and hands are flexed during typing. The wrists and hands are sort of rotated, called supinated, to support the device. Awkward finger and thumb postures, especially with the thumbs, when we're texting and scrolling. When icons and buttons are located near the base of the thumb really takes on a non-neutral posture, such as the image on the bottom in the left. Many smartphone users use one thumb for scrolling and text entry, with many of these people holding the phone in the same hand as they type and select, such as that picture on the bottom left. This method potentially leads to more strain and discomfort compared to other methods, such as typing with both thumbs or four-finger typing using your free hand. The only real advantage seems to be that it leaves one hand free to hold the coffee, for example. The thumb performs best when the posture is most neutral, such as swiping over the surface of the phone, similar to a windshield wiper. There's potentially awkward back postures too, depending on one's choice of the chair. And again, sustained postures, our posture tends to remain relatively static when we're on our phones. Another thing is we grip the device. So if we're holding the device in our hand, that's static grip or sustained grip activity going on there. And like tablets, smartphones should not be used for extended computer work. Rather, use a desktop or a laptop and ensure a proper setup. Ideally, a laptop with external keyboard and mouse if you have no desktop. And then again, repetitive motions. So you have repetitive movements of the wrist and awkward wrist posture to view the screen. Repetitive awkward finger and thumb movements can lead to joint inflammation, which can lead to decreased mobility, throbbing, or pain. It's widely understood that long periods of smartphone use, typing and selecting and scrolling and those sort of activities are associated with thumb and wrist problems. Inadequate lighting, again, we use our smartphones everywhere, so we can be exposed to any type of inadequate lighting. And as well, we've got that blue light at night. So I'm sure you've caught yourself lying in bed from time to time with your smartphone, just surfing the net or on social media and that sort of stuff, scrolling through Twitter. And I'm just going to discuss lighting shortly. Contact stress in the fingers. One in particular is if you hold the phone with your, basically you're holding the phone up on your pinky, onto the side of your pinky finger. So your pinky is under the phone. That's a source of contact stress. And again, forceful exertions, so sustained gripping of the device. Assessing workers' risk. As mentioned in legislative requirements, employers must assess the risk to workers associated with using display screen equipment. So that should always be done in consultation with workers and the OHS committee. Collaboration helps to manage the potential health problems associated with display screen equipment in a practical way by helping spot the risks, making sure health and safety controls are practical, and increasing the level of commitment to working in a healthy way. Consultation involves employers not only giving information to employees, but also listening to them and taking account of what they have to say before making health and safety decisions, because maybe some controls you're trying to implement just aren't practical for the worker. So it's important that we get their input. There's lots of different ways to identify MSI hazards in the workplace. Through observation, through asking questions, through inspections. During workplace inspections, for example, we could take notice of how workers are interacting with their devices and looking at the postures they're using. You could add some questions to your workplace inspection checklist to make sure that you build in ergonomics into your inspections. You could ask or be looking for work surfaces that are at improper heights. You can ask, have the question there, are awkward postures being used? Is the office equipment properly used, like headsets, telephones, monitors, keyboards, mouse, laptop stands? Is equipment free from the following? Free from wear and tear, from not working, from not being appropriate for the person using it, a poor fit, for example. And are there reports of discomfort by the user? So those are some questions to build into your inspection checklist. Monitor how the employees work. Mobile work practices will be particularly vulnerable to slippage into bad habits. So companies should establish a system for checking in, so far as is reasonably practicable, that safe work procedures are being followed. do some spot checks, such as calls, text messages, emails, with an expectation of a photo sent back of the work setup. Workstation reviews, accident or incident investigations, and injury trend analysis are other methods that can be used to assess workers' risk. It's also recommended that you do a workstation review if you have new employees or returning employees or employees changing workstations. And this might just need to be, or just could be done, executed by someone in-house who's knowledgeable in office ergonomics. So I'm not insinuating the need necessarily for a professional ergonomic assessment by an external service provider. If you have some knowledge in-house of office ergonomics, it could be done by someone in-house. Reporting and investigating concerns. So with the supervisor's assistance, employees should be encouraged to review the layout of their own personal workspace using an ergonomics self-assessment tool. The employee would submit the tool or form to their supervisor for review. And this practice can be a part of a new employee's orientation. And all employees should be encouraged to repeat that self-assessment on a regular basis, such as once a year, for example. Here are some examples or sample assessment tools, ergonomic self-assessment tools that can be used. You can take these and kind of like modify them, adapt them as needed to fit your organization's need, and use them with your employees. So that's the resources that Tina has added into the handout section here. We have a computer workstation ergonomics self-assessment checklist from Workplace NL. In fact, there's two from Workplace NL. One incorporates, I have sample 1 and sample 2, and one of them incorporates when you're tasked with having to work in a mobile situation. It is not a regular part of your work, so it's just for a short term. It includes some quick fixes to be able to have a more ergonomic setup, but it's just for temporary purposes, but might be handy for, you might find that useful. And then CRE-MSD, which is from the University of Waterloo, they have a mobile device ergonomics checklist, which was added in the handout section, but unfortunately we were only able to add 5 handouts. So this in-vehicle computing ergonomics checklist didn't get added. However, if you just want to Google, you can access that, or you can email me and I can send it to you. But it's CRE-MSD in-vehicle computing ergonomics checklist. Also, the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors, there's a resource by them that Tina sent to you or added in the handout section. And in that book, it's a very, very handy resource actually to have on performing risk assessments for mobile work. And on page 14, they have a risk assessment checklist too that you might find helpful, like a self-assessment tool. When performing your risk assessments, you want to also analyze the personal habits of users and how they physically interact with their devices. Are they bending the neck excessively to use a smartphone, for example, that they're just not placing high enough? Consider any special needs of the individual as well. You want to look at the characteristics of the task and environment. So with the task, does the worker have tight deadlines that require extensive use of the device over a given period? Are the expectations reasonable? Consider the duration, repetition, and frequency of use of the equipment, and then consider whether additional equipment and controls might be needed. Look at the environment. Is the screen positioned perpendicular to windows so glare from sunlight is avoided? Is the lighting in the room adequate? Do the worker have a suitable chair and desk surface? And then consider the transport piece. Is the worker provided a suitable bag or case for traveling with the laptop or other devices? Do they have a backpack with 2 shoulder straps? Is the weight of the device or other supplies reasonable for regular carrying? Should a wheeled case be used instead? Consider the potential risks from manual handling. So those are some of the factors to be considered in your risk assessment. So now we're going to move into managing risk for the last section of the webinar, and we're now at the next 30-minute point. So that means that it's time to take a micro break. So this micro break is only going to be for 1 minute. I'm going to start again in just 1 minute. However, by all means, feel free to stay stood and move around while you just listen to me talk. Be back with you in a minute. All right, so how do we control the risks? Well, if you have your employees completing a self-assessment tool, well, now would be a time to visit that self-assessment tool and check what needs to be done and that action is taken. So documentation is going to be key here in the risk assessment. You want to record things like what changes are being proposed. Is there new equipment being proposed? Is there an agreed way, new way of working? Who is responsible for implementing the changes? We want to have a target date for implementing the changes, and we're going to record the date the changes are actually implemented. And since employers have very little control over how workers use their mobile devices when they're working off-site, and the eyes are not on them, it's very important that they educate workers about the health risks so that workers will be more likely to make healthier choices. Regular reminders will be key, as I mentioned. Be sure to communicate your expectations regarding how the devices and equipment are to be used. For example, develop safe written procedures and review them with employees on regular intervals. More frequent reminders in between can also help, like during staff meetings, just little quick plugs. It's one thing to provide the necessary equipment to workers, but we need to also make sure, as much as reasonably practicable, that we get the workers actually using the equipment properly. So we need to be encouraging, reinforcing the safe work procedures. Any controls implemented should be based on the principles of ergonomics. So ergonomics is the practice of designing jobs and tasks to match the needs and abilities of the people doing them. And because each of us are different in shape and size, we all have different abilities and needs, and the way we work and that sort of stuff. Work has to be designed with all of these things in mind. So when we're looking at MSI controls, these are the three, I guess, big pieces that stand out. As with all type of work, the first in the hierarchy of controls for display screen equipment is to properly design the work and the workplace. So provide, position, and maintain equipment that's designed and constructed to reduce or eliminate the risk of MSI. Good design takes into account the requirements of the tasks being performed. It allows for good clearance, accommodates neutral postures, and it permits postural variety. And then other controls will be needed as well, like proper work organization and training. So looking at workplace design, you want to make sure that workers can get comfortable in their work. So their forearms should be approximately horizontal, and their eyes should be at about the same height as the top of the screen. We want to make sure there's enough workspace to accommodate all documents or other equipment. A document holder may help avoid awkward neck and eye movements from viewing paper documents. Arrange the desk and screen to avoid glare or bright reflections. This is often easiest if the screen is not directly facing windows or bright lights. Adjust curtains or blinds to prevent intrusive light. Make sure there's space under the desk to move the legs. Avoid excessive pressure under the edge of the seat, on the back of the legs and knees. And also make sure that a footrest is provided for the worker to fully support their feet if they can't support their feet on the floor. Work organization. Even when a worker has a workstation that has been properly designed to the best of the employer's ability for that particular worker, there's still potential for MSI risk factors to present themselves. For example, the worker might spend long periods of time at their workstation, taking on sustained postures and repetitive motions and skipping breaks. So additional controls, which are administrative in nature, will be needed to make sure that the employee's work is organized in a way that these risk factors can be avoided and the employee is trained in the work practices that you expect them to follow. Organize the employee's work so that they're able to alternate between display screen work and other work that doesn't involve screens. In most jobs, it's possible to stop display screen work to do other tasks, such as going to meetings or making phone calls. These natural changes of activity allows the body to use different muscles and rest any fatigued muscles, and helps prevent overall fatigue and eye strain. But if there's no natural breaks like this in a job, employers should plan rest breaks for employees. In addition to an employee's regular scheduled breaks, like a coffee break or 2 15-minute breaks and then a lunch break as well, employers should encourage employees to also take, in addition to that, frequent micro breaks so tissues get that rest that's needed. Breaks or changes of activity should allow users to get up from their workstations and move around to break up sitting too long, to break up the prolonged sitting. We need to aim to alternate postures very frequently throughout the day, so get a good mix of standing, sitting, and moving. Stretch and change positions regularly. Take a stroll, shake out your legs, move your arms. Look into the distance from time to time and blink often. Change activity before you get tired rather than to recover from tiredness. Again, breaks plus micro breaks. Our standard break schedule, hoping that people even take their standard break schedule, because often workers skip those too. But even if you took the standard break schedule of 15 minutes in the morning, say, and then a half an hour or an hour lunch and another 15 afterwards, that is not enough to combat the musculoskeletal injury health risks from prolonged sitting postures and repetitive motions. So we want to be, the general rule of thumb is to get up out of our chair after 20 to 30 minutes of sitting for a minimum of 1 to 2 minutes and get movement into that 1 to 2 minutes to get the blood flowing. And a key too would be that for every hour of work, for sure, even if you just say, for example, you're using a sit-stand station and you just decided after 30 minutes to stand for another 30 minutes, and now you have an hour gone by, don't just sit down again after that 1 hour. Make an effort to get up and move away from your workstation at least for a couple of minutes every hour, because those muscles in your neck and shoulders and upper back, they need rest too. And just going from sitting to standing and standing to sitting and continuing to use the computer is not providing them enough rest. You can set reminders on your phone or download break reminder software. There's lots of free software available, and if you can Google that, just Google break monitoring software or stretch break reminders. But if you want some examples, you can certainly email me or call and I can give you some examples too. I'll just say too, though, back on the 20 to 30 minute piece there, that is a general recommendation. Some people may find it very uncomfortable to sit for even 20 minutes. So that's an individual thing. Listen to your body. And when you're tired, when your body is fidgeting and you're just not able to maintain neutral posture, that means you need to change posture. It's time to do that. And training, so employers will need to train their employees in the safe work practices and procedures you expect them to follow. And improving workers' knowledge about how to work safely will improve their work habits too, which obviously in turn helps reduce MSIs. So when it comes to using technology, a lot of MSI prevention comes down to the personal interactions that the worker has with their devices, the choices they make regarding posture and duration of use and things like that. So make them informed, so that they can make informed decisions on how they interact with their devices. Explain the risk factors and be sure they understand them. Be sure they understand the health effects. Explain, for example, the common awkward postures associated with using the various devices and what problems can arise. Make sure they understand what good neutral posture actually is so that they can properly set up their work area. Teach them how to adjust the chair or other furniture like their desk height. Teach them to clean the screen. Whoops. Teach them to clean the screen and adjust screens and lighting to avoid reflections and glare. Explain your expectations regarding taking breaks and regularly changing up work activities to break up screen time. Don't forget to inform them of your organization's reporting procedures, who they report to and what the report form looks like and where to access it if they have concerns or signs and symptoms. And make sure employees also know how to assess their own risks for MSI. For example, how to use the self-assessment tool if your organization decides to take that kind of approach. Moving into usage recommendations. So this is the posture that we want to try to achieve when we're sitting using computing devices. This is what we call neutral posture. On our website, we have a resource called Sitting Position with instructions to help get you into that posture. And I'm not going to go through this list one by one because I will cover these points now shortly through some examples. Also on our website, as well as on Workplace NL's YouTube channel, we have a 3-minute video clip called Ergonomics Adjusting Your Chair. So this is a nice little video to share with your employees. Once you're seated in neutral posture, then it's time to introduce yourself to your work surface and make any required adjustments. So with your work surface, the height of your keyboard and mouse should be at the same height as your forearms and elbows so that your wrists are straight. The work surface then should be at or slightly, basically they should be at elbow height. If your desk is too high and you can't lower it, you'll need to raise your chair. Make sure you raise the seat and not your armrests. Once you've adjusted your armrests for neutral posture for you and your elbows are at your shoulders are in their rested position, your armrests are now at the proper height. So if you need to raise your body to get to your desk because your desk can't lower, well then you need to raise the seat pan, not your armrests. Otherwise you're putting your shoulders in an elevated position, an awkward position. You might also now require a footrest if you've raised your chair. Also make sure there's sufficient space under the work surface for your legs, or you'll end up leaning forward at the desk with an unsupported back. And contact stress in the arms, unsupported legs, and you'll end up adopting that turtleneck posture, turtle posture in your neck. With the monitor, you want to position the monitor directly in front of you. If you're using just one monitor, it's directly in front of you. If there's windows nearby, again, repositioning your desk maybe to avoid glare by placing your screen perpendicular to the windows so that your line of sight is parallel to the windows. To further avoid glare, you can place your monitor directly under light fixtures. Avoid placing your monitor directly under light fixtures. You want to place your monitor at a height that allows your neck to be upright, not bent down or back while you're viewing your screen. And the top of the basically the rule of thumb is that the top of the active viewing area of your screen is not higher than your eye height. Generally, like the top sentence or the menu bar on a Word document should be at about the height of your eyes, level with your eyes, and then you just have a slight downward gaze, which is your natural gaze to see things. If you use bifocals or trifocals though, you might need to lower your monitor a little more to achieve a neutral neck posture. The monitor distance should be about arm's length away. And if you're having difficulty viewing your screen when it's positioned that far away, it's very important to get an eye exam. Working with a computer on a regular basis, a few hours a day or more, is very demanding on the eyes. Computer vision syndrome and digital eye strain are terms that refer to vision problems related to using computers and related devices. Things like eye strain, headaches, blurred vision, dry eyes, and neck and shoulder pain. So you want to have ergonomically sound computer workstations, and you want to have favorable work rest schedules, and you want to have properly designed visual environments. But if you have poor vision, those controls can only take it so far. So we need to have regular eye exams. Here are some examples of multiple monitor workstations. If you use two monitors and you use them about the same amount of time each, you want to position them so that they're side by side, touching each other with the point where they meet directly in front of you. And then there's a slight V angle. They're on a bit of an angle, angling toward you. If one is a primary monitor, generally it's said that if you use one monitor about 70% of the time or more, then that's considered a primary monitor, and you place that one directly in front of you, and the other monitor would go touching that one off to the left or the right side, and it should be on the same side as your dominant eye. If you're wondering how to determine your dominant eye, that's something you can reach out to me about as well, because there's a little test I can explain, but just not enough time for today's webinar. And then your third monitor, if you use one, would go on the other side. Keyboard and mouse. So with the keyboard and mouse, you want to have it at elbow height. You want to place them side by side, one another, and within the reach of your fingers when your arms are relaxed at your body sides. So in other words, you should be able to work with your elbows at your sides, and then the keyboard and mouse is placed at your fingertips. You shouldn't have to reach forward for them. Rather than bending your wrist to use your mouse, try pivoting about your elbow. Hold the mouse lightly, and when you're not using it, let go of it. We don't want to be gripping the mouse when we don't need to. You can try using some keyboard shortcuts to cut down on the number of times you have to key. So in the handouts that were provided, the One Mobile Working Risk Management System, there's an appendix, and in the appendix it has some keyboard shortcuts for even using phones and tablets. Or you can just do a Google search for keyboard shortcuts. Palm rests. Are palm rests or palm supports ergonomic? Well, palm supports can provide support for your palm during periods of inactivity when you're not typing or mousing, which assist in reducing the tendency to drop your hands. However, it's critical that the support has a low enough profile so that your wrist does not get caught on the rest when you move the mouse forward, when you're moving the cursor up, or reach for the upper rows on the keyboard, like the image on the bottom left. Okay, so you don't want to get your wrists caught onto the armrest. They should be onto the gel pad, the palm support. They should be a lower profile. In other words, the palm support, when it's uncompressed, it should be level with and not higher than the front edge of the keyboard housing, or the mouse surface to prevent any pressure on the underside of the wrist. The palm support should match the front edge of the keyboard in width, height, slope, and contour. Depending on the design of your keyboard, a palm support might not even be necessary. Rest the palm, though, if you do use one, rest the heel of your palm on the palm support and don't rest your wrist on it. The reason for that is because if you rest your wrist on it, then you have the soft tissues in that carpal tunnel, and you're putting pressure on the median nerve by compressing those soft tissues in the carpal tunnel, and you put yourself at a greater risk of carpal tunnel syndrome. So they're meant to be to support the heel of the palm and not the wrist. And they're also meant to be used between periods of typing, not during typing. When you're typing, it's best to float your hands over your keyboard. The image on the top left is ideal. The worker positions the keyboard at the edge of the desk and adjusts the height of the desk or chair so the keyboard is elbow height and there's no contact stress or pressure under the wrist. On the top right here, this is an example of a worker dropping the palms, and there's significant contact stress. And on the bottom right, this shows the same height, width, contour, and slope as the keyboard. The front lip of the keyboard is narrow also, which allows the palm rest to be brought closer to the keys and the keyboard to be brought closer to you. So there's less reaching to reach the keys. You want to select your working environment proactively. Many airports and hotels now have landing zones for short-term work. So if you're using laptops and notebooks on the road, you can choose places like that to set up your equipment more ergonomically. Consider how long you're likely to be working and whether the arrangement will be suitable and comfortable. One of the least ergonomic arrangements is working with your laptop on your lap. You want to try to avoid that. That can result in pretty significant awkward neck postures. If you have to do sustained work, always aim to work at a table. If you're able to work at a table, aim to use an external keyboard and mouse and a riser or laptop stand to place the laptop on to raise the screen. Or you can just place it on a box or books or something like that. Something hard though, that's not going to impact the fan. Proper airflow, ventilation. Smaller size of laptops makes them more travel friendly, and also smaller size keyboards makes them more travel friendly as well if you're only using these things for short periods of time. If you have an external keyboard and mouse but no stand, again, you can raise it on books or a box or a shoe box or a board game box or that sort of thing. If the laptop is your primary computer in the office, for example, you want to opt for a docking station and also an external larger monitor so that the laptop can function just the same as a desktop. And this could really help prevent or significantly reduce musculoskeletal injury pain. Continuing on with laptops and notebooks, if you're unable to use external components, consider the tasks that you'll be working on and adjust your laptop accordingly. When you have to read lengthy documents, raise the screen to eye level to avoid bending your head down. When you're typing intensively, lower the keyboard to elbow height so that your wrists are straight, and take several short breaks. Work in a well-lit room to avoid a significant contrast between the lighting of the screen and lighting in the room. The same lighting needs for your desktop will be the same for your laptops and all of your devices. You want to change your posture as described previously, aiming to sit no longer than 20 minutes, 30 minutes max at a time. 20 minutes more likely if it's not an ideal setup, like you don't have the external keyboard and mouse. So for transporting laptops and all external components, it might be best to use a rolling case or wheels with wheels for pushing and pulling rather than carrying the laptop. Wheeled cases are certainly recommended for loads over 10 pounds. Or you could use a backpack style laptop bag as well, being sure to place both shoulder straps around you and not just one. Straps should be wide and padded and a waist belt attached to distribute some of the load to the hips. And if you're required to carry a laptop or tablet as part of your work, your employer should be making the bag, a suitable bag, available to you to carry it with. Tablets and smartphones. For calls, especially long calls, use a hands-free device rather than cradle the phone between your face and neck. Hold the phone in your hand and use a speakerphone if you have to. Use other hands-free options such as headsets, earbuds, and headphones. Just don't cradle the phone between your ear and shoulder. Maintain neutral wrist posture and alternate your hands when you're holding devices. For tablets, consider a case with hand straps to reduce gripping. Maintain an upright neutral spine, so try to avoid that slouching in the chair. Plan to do longer, more extensive text entry like emails and meeting notes on a laptop, and keep to shorter text on your smartphone or tablet. And use an external keyboard and prop the tablet on a stand to improve the viewing angle. Or sync the tablet with a compatible computer monitor or television to improve neck posture and increase screen size. You can use speech recognition as well to reduce keystrokes. And for texting and typing activities, alternate your fingers when you're using buttons and touch screens to type. Use a stylus or your fingers to type instead of the thumb when possible. Like lay the phone down or hold the device in one hand and type with the other with a finger. When you do use your thumb to type, use the pad of your thumb rather than the tip of your thumb. The larger screen of the tablet compared to the smartphone creates more non-neutral postures for both the thumb and wrist. These non-neutral postures can be reduced by moving the keyboard up on the screen and also by using a split keyboard, such as the one shown. Splitting the keyboard in half with one part on the right side and the other on the left side, it makes it easier to type with two hands on the tablet, minimizing overextension of the thumb and wrists. Accessories for tablets and smartphones can also be used. Cases can support and orient the devices for better viewing angles, improving neck and head postures, while allowing for hands-free operation, which unrestricts your posture of your wrists and arms associated with holding the device. A thin external keyboard, such as many of the Bluetooth keyboards that work with both smartphones and tablets, can also improve your wrist postures and comfort. For smartphones, the smaller phones often make it easier for the thumbs to reach much of the operating range of the touch screen, improving performance. Of course, avoid laying the tablet on your lap, as I had mentioned with the laptops. Instead, you can use a case that can tilt the tablet up on an angle to view. When tablets and smartphones are provided for workers for work purposes, they're intended for sustained, if they are intended for sustained mobile work, accessories should be provided where practicable, such as keyboards, styluses, cases, or risers. Those types of accessories are more of a requirement if workers are required to use these for a regular part of their job. A few pictures for smartphones. We're just about to clue up here, guys. Single thumb is the most commonly used inputting style on smartphones. It's also the highest risk for your thumb and wrist. Instead, hold your phone in one hand and input with the forefinger of the other hand, or again, use a stylus. For longer text entry, use an external keyboard or hold the phone in both hands and type using both thumbs, sharing the load. You want to avoid holding the phone with your little finger or your pinky at the base of the phone because we want to avoid contact stress. You keep your pinky at the side instead. Hold your phone up, right? Try to raise it so that your neck can be in a more neutral posture. And if you can use elbow support, try to obtain elbow support, but making sure, being mindful to maintain an upright spine, so an engaged core. It can engage your core muscles to avoid that C-shaped spine, and minimize the time you spend on the task. Here's a few travel solutions. When you are truly mobile working, such as having to do a bit of work in a vehicle, you can create a desk. If you work on a laptop in your vehicle, you can buy steering wheel trays. Even a lap desk like the one pictured in the middle here is better than having the laptop directly on your lap. You could also buy compact, portable, very travel-friendly laptop stands like the ones pictured on the right. These ones are called a laptop roost. They're really great for working in restaurants or hotel rooms if you absolutely need to. Try to avoid high intensity, high concentration tasks while you're traveling. These tasks tend to keep you in one position for longer and they take your attention away from using good posture. You can adjust the screen brightness to match the conditions that you're working in. Keep screens clean so that they're more difficult to read. They're not more difficult to read. And look after your eyes. So a couple points on your eyes. Severe eye strain occurs in 63% of people who look down at a device compared to only 21% of people who keep the device at eye level. So hold the device at least chest level. Adjust the screen brightness. It should match the light intensity of the surrounding environment to reduce the risk of eye strain and fatigue. You want to start with, when you're adjusting your screen brightness, start with the lowest setting that you can work from, and then increase the brightness as needed. Some will say to use a light green screen background instead of the pre-programmed blue background. Also, if you find the text size too small when you're looking on your smartphones or tablets, what you're reading is too small to read, you could try rotating your device into landscape to make the font a little larger. Give your eyes a break as well. Follow the 20-20-20 rule. So look away, look 20 feet away from your screen every 20 minutes for 20 seconds. Okay, so with smartphones, you have to bear in mind that you're looking at a relatively small screen and often small fonts held close to your eyes. And then this means you're maintaining a fixed short focal length, which strains the eye muscles, and it can result in eyes feeling tired quite easily. Blue light exposure from smartphone screens in the evening and night can interfere with the circadian rhythm, which has been linked to sleep disturbances and other health disorders. The technology industry is moving towards screens with blue light, which filter blue light, but some devices currently don't have this. But given the low costs involved, I'd err on the side of caution and fit your device with a blue light filter application. Some devices have the option to turn down the blue light spectrum later in the day and evening. So for example, on an iPhone, in settings, you go into display and brightness and then adjust the night shift setting to shift the colors of your display to the warmer end of the color spectrum after dark. Eye exams helps to ensure users can comfortably see screens and work effectively using visual fatigue, without visual fatigue. Providing eye tests and any necessary glasses for display screen work would be considered a definite best practice, but it's not a requirement by law here in Newfoundland for employers. It is, however, in the United Kingdom. And the last point on controlling risk is that healthy lifestyle behaviors also reduce our risk of MSI. So very briefly, the benefits of physical activity outside of your workday will find their way into your work. Exercise can also improve sleep quality, and daily exercise helps reduce soreness and tension because they provide changes in posture and ensure a healthy supply of blood to your muscles. Maintaining fitness and strength conditions the body and it reduces strain. But working overtime reduces your opportunity to exercise and relax. So if you have to work overtime, take extra care to continue your usual exercise routine and take micro breaks. Periodic breaks and micropauses are particularly helpful in countering the effects of long work days when you can't avoid working overtime. You should take micropauses more often as the day progresses, because this is when the effects of muscular fatigue will start to occur. Your activities outside of work can add to or reduce the accumulative effects of work. Activities that keep you fit can help counterbalance the effects of computer work. And a healthy diet nourishes your body tissues. A healthy diet combined with exercise helps maintain healthy body weight, which minimizes pressure on our joints. Water and adequate rest both help us prevent fatigue, mental and physical fatigue. And water also helps us lubricate our joints. And using good posture outside of the work further minimizes stress and strain on our bodies. Circling back now to managing workers' risk of MSI from working, mobile working, a key aspect of risk control is monitoring. So the effectiveness of control measures you implement will need to be reviewed periodically, and where the monitoring identifies a risk of MSI that's not been eliminated or reduced, then additional control measures will need to be implemented where reasonably practicable. So the risk assessment should be reviewed as well when there's major changes made to any equipment or furniture or work environment or software used, when workers change workstations, when the nature of the work tasks change considerably, when the level of work expectations change, for example, the amount of travel, work pressures, and deadlines, if a worker's personal mobility and health changes, when it's thought that the controls in place may be causing other problems, and when there are other factors which affect the ease of mobile working. It will be vital that managers and staff discuss mobile work on a regular basis. Worker participation in solutions is key to effective risk management. So that sums up the information for today's webinar. Just to summarize, today we looked at legislative requirements around mobile work and use of computers in general, responsibilities of workplace parties to prevent MSIs. We looked at the MSI risk factors and how to assess workers' MSI risks, how to manage the risks, particularly in mobile working, and using usage recommendations for the various computing devices. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars. We have 2 happening next week: creating a harassment prevention plan and education and training a safe and competent workforce. To receive emails on upcoming workshops and webinars, subscribe to our newsletter by Googling our website and then going to view all events in the bottom right-hand corner of the main page. And then hit click here to subscribe to the newsletter. Please, just a reminder to complete the evaluation form, and also another reminder to please log in and complete the employer feedback survey for Move Well, Work Well Week if you haven't done so already. Remember that you could win a prize. Thanks so much, everybody, for attending this morning. Sorry to take you a couple minutes over here. If you have any questions, I will follow up in an email, but I haven't seen any come in. No, still no questions. But if something piques your mind, by all means, reach out to me. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and have a great weekend.